Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Today I will, for the roundtable discussion, focus on the issue of management of tax arrears, outstanding tax arrears, and presenting the Cameroonian experience during and after the pandemic. There's too much to say, a lot to say about the challenges within our administration. And I think it will be useful for the listeners to have a focus on a specific issue. That's why we propose to you to focus on this issue of the management of outstanding tax arrears. So my presentation will be divided in mainly three parts. I will introduce my presentation by exposing the context in our country, and then focus a little bit on the management of tax debt arrears in Cameroon during ordinary times, and thereafter present the tax debt management during and beyond the crisis in Cameroon. We might discuss about other challenges, especially in the roundtable discussion. Well, regarding the context, the tax arrears have always been a challenge to the administrations, mostly those in low-income countries like Cameroon, long before the advent of COVID-19. And I'll come back on it when presenting and concluding the first part of my presentation. Regarding Cameroon, a recent assessment of the outstanding tax debts has shown that they stand at over 1,000 billion, that is the equivalent of $2 billion US, against a collection amount of 4.5 billion US dollar tax revenue collected on an annual basis, that is 2020. So this presentation shall examine how Cameroon managed its tax debt arrears in ordinary times, as I said it, and during and beyond the crisis. First of all, how do we use to manage tax debt arrears in Cameroon during ordinary times? What I shall say is that faced with the recurrence of outstanding tax debts, the approach deployed in Cameroon has been centered on writing off bad debts, because there's a lot, we're going to come back on it, offsetting debts for specific types of taxpayers, and then enforcing collection like all taxation administration usually do. First of all, the writing of bad debts. When we look into the 1,000, that is the $2 billion US amount of outstanding tax arrears, we will notice that most of those arrears are constituted with bad debts. And to tackle this issue, the authorities instituted a committee comprised of the audit bench of the Supreme Court, the tax administration, and the Treasury to examine such debts. Over 1/3, that is 330 billion in CFA franc, that is 0.3 billion US dollar, was identified to be written off for they belong to taxpayers who do not exist. The second way of tackling how we tackle the issue of debt arrears in Cameroon during ordinary times is offsetting taxes. And this tool is usually used when we face difficulties with the state-owned companies. Taxes offset are generally offset with the debts the government owes the said companies, especially companies which deals with utilities, water, electricity, and telephone. Tax debt arrears over the past year has been reduced by over 170 billion CFA francs using the tool of offsetting taxes for the state-owned companies. The other method, the tools used to tackle the issue of outstanding tax arrears in ordinary time is tax collection enforcement, and at this level we use standard practice that are used in most administration, like freezing bank accounts of taxpayers or closing some businesses. That is very rare instances. Well, all those methods, though they have shown their proof, they are not, we noticed that they were not adapted to crisis periods marked generally by the rise of tax debt arrears. And we have also noticed that they were limited due to sometimes political intervention, where the taxation administration will be prevented to go forward because of sensitive cases like the one I've cited before, state-owned companies, etc., etc. So the issue, and that is one of the explanation of the amount of outstanding that tax arrears in lower income countries. One of the reason which explains the high amount is the fact that sometimes the taxation administration don't have free hands to act. Let me now deal with the second part of my presentation, that is the cases of tax debt during and beyond the crisis, and especially the experience of Cameroon. And I would like to say at this juncture that Cameroon has, before the COVID crisis, Cameroon has been experiencing another crisis, the security challenges in its northern part with Boko Haram, and in the western regions with separatist groups. So we had, before COVID-19, already a small experience in managing the tax administration in general and the outstanding tax arrears in particular in a context of crisis. So with the advent of the COVID-19, the situation of tax arrears was compounded due to the suspension of tax collection activities. Like we've recorded 200 billion CFA more, that is $400 million in the course of the 2020 fiscal year. So with our experience in the tax collection in times of crisis, the strategy which we implemented during the COVID crisis and that we're implementing right now is based on the 4 various tools, specifically the tool of the special tax compromise, which I'm going to explain, the moratorium, the recapitalization tool, and the digitalization. Well, to start with the special tax compromise, because of the crisis, we have been taken to, set tax reliefs to companies situated in the regions affected by the security crisis. And these tax reliefs were extended to companies in the various sectors affected by the COVID-19 crisis, that is tourism, transportation, etc. In this situation, over 112 companies for an amount of outstanding tax arrears of 35 billion, that is $70 million, benefited from these tax reliefs. So we sometimes combine the tax compromise with the moratorium. That is, we consider, when we consider that the weight of their outstanding debts is very high, we can also give them the benefit from moratoria, that is installment payments. This procedure is the payment of over 32 billion CFA. Well, the other tool we use during crisis time is the recapitalization. In a nutshell, as a part of restructuring of the debt of public entities, the state has undertaken to recapitalize some of these entities by transforming part of their tax debt into equity investment. And we've done it for something like 161 billion CFA of tax arrears. The third, I will insist a lot on this because it has been a subject of discussion. We've examined the issue of digitalization in all its aspects during the previous presentation. And I would now like to focus on digitalization in Cameroon, and especially the experience of digitalization, concrete experience of digitalization on the area of the management of outstanding tax arrears. First of all, I would like to say that Cameroon engaged in a full digitalization since last decade. And we can consider now that almost all the procedures within our administration, starting from the e-filing to e-payments, these are effective in our environment. So the current crisis have just underscored the merits of this move. And this is particularly true of the tax clearance certificate in tax arrears management. So what is the tax clearance certificate? Before, taxpayers had to prove their compliance via manually issued documents, tax status, slip, tax, non-indebtedness, etc., etc. These had negative effects on the business climate and were source of unethical practices. So the tax clearance certificate, instituted to replace all the numerous paperwork cited above in Cameroon, this is now the sole instrument which attests the taxpayers' compliance. So how is it obtained? It is obtained online with no human intervention to taxpayers who either owe no taxes or benefit from a respite of payment or a moratorium. So how does it enforce compliance? Required for all economic operations and administrative procedures, this tax clearance certificate is a very important document within the business environment community, because no tax clearance certificate is equals no tax clearance certificate equals to be blacklisted from all economic transactions like banking, importation, and or exportation, public contracts, and so on and so forth. So what have been the results so far? First of all, the main results we recorded and that we noticed was an anticipatory one measure. That is, the use of tax clearance certificate helped us a lot to avoid tax arrears, additional tax arrears in amid the crisis. Because in 2020, for instance, amid the crisis, we realized we were able to collect the same amount of spontaneous payment, that is the payment after filing by the taxpayer, payment without any forceful action. We were able to record the same level of tax collection like we did in the previous year, that is in 2020, which was something very extraordinary. And that was explained by the fact that the taxpayers knew that if they didn't come to pay the taxes, if they didn't pay their taxes, they would face this issue of tax clearance certificate. And we also noticed that it was a very interesting tool which improved its efficiency in this era of barrier measures. To give an idea of some taxpayers who were owing us money during this period, that is 148 of them, and who were not facing specific difficulties, but who were obliged to come to us to clear their situation for a stake of 60 billion CFA, that is 120 million US dollar. So in conclusion, the strategy in the management of outstanding tax debts during COVID and the crisis, the other crisis Cameroon has been facing, is a blend of a mix between assistance to taxpayers via the reduction of their tax burden, but also enforcement made possible with digitalization. So we expect and firmly expect that by the end of 2022, we aim, and what we aim by the end of 2022 is a drop to 400 CFA, that is 400 CFA from the 1,000 billion. We're going to drop to 400 billion CFA in the outstanding tax arrears. So this is the experience of Cameroon. I thank you so much, and I will be pleased to share other issues in terms of tax administration, if necessary, during the roundtable discussion. Thank you very much.